Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Aliens and UFOs video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's conclude the wonderful book UFO Sightings by Alan Baker. This will be the chapter called Conclusion, Part 6, and this will pretty much wrap up everything associated with this book. All good things do indeed come to an end. This was a really good book that went through so much evidence and examples, different theories, both pros and cons associated with multiple things. But eventually, yeah, we do have to reach the end of the book itself. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's start this part 6, and then I'll wrap up everything, give my final thoughts and opinions on this book, and let me know as always what you guys and gals think as well. Very fascinating book. I can't wait to start my next one sometime soon involving another thing in the world of aliens and UFOs. So yes, again, let's go ahead and let's start the conclusion chapter, the last final chapter, and this will be part 6. So here's what it says. Intense gravitational fields also form the principle behind a theoretical device called Tipler's infinite rotating cylinder. In 1974, the American physicist Frank Tipler suggested that a sufficiently massive cylinder rotating at half the speed of light could distort space-time to the extent that closed time-like loops are created through which past time would become accessible. British physicist John Gribben has calculated that Tipler's cylinder would have to be 100 kilometers long, 10 kilometers in radius, have the mass of the sun, and the density of an atomic nucleus in order to work. There is, however, a problem with building such a device, quite apart from the obvious one. The rotating cylinder would be so dense that it would instantly undergo axial collapse, somewhat like a star collapsing, and it would end up looking more like a giant pancake than a cylinder. It may forever be beyond our talents to construct Tipler's infinite rotating cylinder, although Gribben suggests that it may one day be possible to utilize natural objects, such as the so-called millisecond pulsar discovered in 1982, for the same purpose. Another reason why time travel may be impossible is that nature may well refuse to allow us to create paradoxes. This is a well-known concept that once again has an extensive provenance in the world of science fiction. Time paradoxes violate a putative law known as the causal ordering postulate, which insists that causes must precede effects. The most well-known of these paradoxes is that in which a psychotic time traveler goes back into the past to kill his own father before he, the time traveler, was conceived. Many physicists maintain that time travel will always be impossible because the scenarios such as this one I just described would violate the COP. Of course, one needn't choose such an extreme case to illustrate the time paradox. There is the old Ray Bradbury story in which time travelers go sightseeing in prehistory and return to find their democratic world transferred or transformed into a totalitarian hell. One of their number discovers the reason: a brushed or crushed butterfly on the sole of his shoe. Even a seemingly insignificant alteration in the past might have far-reaching consequences, which the COP would not allow. However, all is not lost for the time travel enthusiast. It may just be that quantum theory has a way to avoid creating paradoxes. According to the so-called many worlds interpretation, we do not live in a universe as such, but in a multiverse composed of an infinite number of ghost realities existing coterminously with this one. The many worlds interpretation was arrived at through experiments with single photons, particles of light, but can be applied to events in the macroscopic world. In John Gribben's words, we live amidst a myriad array of ghost realities corresponding to all the myriad ways every quantum system in the entire universe could choose to jump. So, in the macroscopic world, every time we make a choice to cross a road at a particular point, for instance, the universe divides into an infinite number of slightly different branches in which we made a different choice. If the many worlds interpretation is an accurate description of reality, then the problem of time paradoxes would not arise. Any irresponsible time traveler intent on altering the past could create an alternate universe quite separately from his own, which would thus be preserved. He could still kill his own father, but it wouldn't matter. It would just mean that in the universe, the new one, he was not born. In his native universe, however, he was born. It can thus be seen that the initial groundwork, at least for a workable theory of time travel, has been laid. Whether it ultimately proves to be correct, only time will tell, if the reader will pardon the expression. If, on the other hand, it proves impossible to send physical objects, such as craft, explorers, etc., back through time, this does not necessarily disprove the time travel hypothesis with regards to UFOs. We knew that there are certain fundamental particles that travel from the future into the past, and it may prove feasible to utilize them to carry information back through time. If our remote descendants ever find a way to do this, they may refine their technology to the point that they can send back themselves in a form of quasi-holographic images, capable of interacting with the target era, collecting information, and so on. If this turns out to be the case, the apparently ghostly behavior of UFOs and their occupants appearing and vanishing at will, etc., would make more sense. In his book, UFOs Operation Trojan Horse, John Keel speculates in the most interesting way along related lines. He theorizes that UFOs are themselves not composed of matter as such, but rather of an unknown form of energy that, once it has arrived, simulates matter in order to interact more fully with the environment. In this way, it is capable of leaving physical traces such as radiation, landing marks, and so on. This, of course, wild speculation, and it will turn out not to be the case. Indeed, the time travel hypothesis suffers from a major drawback, which involves the intelligence, one might call it the common sense, of our remote descendants. If they really are returning to the various stages of Earth's history in order to conduct research, they may well have rendered that information useless by their very acts of temporal exploration. Now, the notion of gods from the sky is hugely significant in terms of our mythologies and our cultural development, which surely would have been very different had we not evidenced an interest in the heavens and their denizens. Some ufologists have suggested that our mythical systems have been heavily influenced by visits from UFOs and their occupants. If so, this damages the time travel hypothesis, since there would surely be little point in studying a history you yourself have created by your very act of studying. Although this statement could be countered by referring to the many worlds interpretation, which would hold that travelers are from an alternate universe and thus have not polluted their own Earth's history, the question still remains: why bother to study ours? This is one of many questions I would put to a UFNaut, or if I lucky or unlucky enough to encounter one. Then the final chapter, or the subchapter, is called the Shamanic Hypothesis. One of the favorite assertions of those researchers who do not subscribe to the extraterrestrial or time travel hypothesis is that the UFO phenomenon has always been with us in one guise or another. What our ancestors saw as flaming shields in the sky, accompanied by angels or demons, we see as interstellar spacecraft, accompanied by scientific survey teams from other planets. In each case, according to the non-extraterrestrialists, the assumption is entirely erroneous. The natural progression from this position is toward a hypothesis that takes into account the historical ubiquity of such phenomenon, with special regard to the human capacity for myth-making, the interaction with reality that is driven and informed by the imagination. Now, by imagination, I do not mean to imply that UFO encounters are merely fictions. On the contrary, they constitute another order of reality with which certain members of the human species have interacted through its history. Imagination in this context means, in the words of the British anomalist Patrick Harper, the reversal of our common notion of the imaginative as something unreal, something imaginary, allowing it an autonomous life that includes spontaneous apparitions. In order to understand better how this interaction with reality might work with regards to UFO encounters, we can look at the visionary tradition of shamanism, which utilizes altered states of consciousness to contact the spirits residing in the natural world. Shamanism is essentially a benign and beautiful tradition whose fundamental aim is the pursuit of sacred knowledge, combined with the power to heal and restore. In his 1989 book, The Elements of Shamanism, the anthropologist Neville Drury describes how a person becomes a shaman. Shamans are called to their vocation in different ways. For some, it is a matter of ancestral lineage or hereditary bonds establishing the person in that position, or a situation where a would-be shaman seeks initiation from one already established in this role. In other cases, it seems almost as if the spirits have chosen the shaman rather than the other way around. These are the greater shamans, those who have been called spontaneously through dreams or mythical visions to embody supernatural power. Those who have simply inherited their role are regarded as lesser shamans and hold a lower status in society, especially among the peoples of Siberia and Arctic North America. When a prospective shaman is chosen by the spirits, the process which then comes into play can be a very harrowing one. Indeed, many reach initiation through serious illness or injury, which brings them close to death. When death approaches most closely, contact is then established between human and spirit, the latter taking the form of entities from the underworld, the sky, or the souls of dead ancestors. At this time, he will then be nursed by an experienced shaman who will guide him along the perilous path to initiation. Once this has been achieved, the shaman performs a vital service to society through his ongoing contact with the spirits of nature. One of the most important functions involve asking various spirits for permission to hunt animals. For a potent example of this, we can turn to the Eskimos, who occupy the area bounded by the Hudson Bay, the Bering Straits, and Greenland. Like other shamanic peoples, the Eskimos believe that the world is controlled by invisible forces or spirits of nature called Inuwa. The Inuwa reside in all natural objects, including animals, the sea, the air, even the rocks and stones. When contact is made between an Inuwa and a human being, the Inuwa becomes a personal totem or Torgak. For instance, the spirit of the bear may become a man's Torngak, in which case, if a man is killed by a bear, he will be restored to life and will become a shaman in Angakok. While the spirits of bears and stones are considered to be among the most powerful, those of the sea also hold a very important place in Eskimo mythology. The goddess of the sea, called Sedna, is extremely significant since it is she who holds sway over all the animals of the deep upon which the Eskimos depend for their survival. Sedna is the goddess most feared by the Eskimos, who are careful to placate her with sacrifices. The Nularouse Encyclopedia of Mythology describes how the Angkok must endeavor to ensure the success of a sea hunt. Sometimes when the Eskimos fail to catch any seals, the Angkoks dive down to the bottom of the sea to compel Sedna to set them loose. According to ancient Greenland legend, the Angkok who want to reach her must first pass through the kingdom of the dead, and then an abyss where there turns ceaselessly a wheel of ice and a boiling cauldron full of seals. When the Angkok has managed to escape the huge dog guarding the entry, he has to cross a second abyss on a bridge as slender as a knife edge. Some of the spirits are inimical to humanity. One legend tells of an Angkok who traveled too far out to sea and suddenly found themselves surrounded by the kayaks of some fire spirits who were intent on capturing him. When it seemed that he was lost, another kayak appeared, its prow opening and shutting like a mouth. The fire spirits immediately fled, and the kayak belonged to the Angkok's protecting spirit. So how then can shamanism be compared to the strange journeys undergone by UFO abductees? One of the most profound connections is the incredibly harrowing operation conducted on the shamanic initiate, during which his body is dismembered by the attending spirits and his internal organs removed. The spirits then replace them with new organs, pieces of quartz, and iron bones. In his 1994 book, Demonic Reality, A Field Guide to the Other World, Patrick Harbour describes the case of a UFO abductee named Sandra Larson, who was traveling by car in North Dakota on August 26, 1975, when she saw a number of glowing UFOs approaching. She had a missing time period about an hour and then sought the help of a hypnotherapist. Under hypnosis, she recalled being taken into a UFO. One of the aliens scraped the inside of her nose with a long instrument. Her skull was then opened and her brain removed and then replaced. Other abductees recall being taken to underground caverns in which painful physical experiments are performed. Part of the shamanic initiatory journey also involves a journey to the underworld where their bodies are destroyed and remade. Harper suggests that the fragments of quartz inserted into the shaman's body, and whose function is to enable him to fly, are similar to the devices that are implanted in the bodies of abductees. Again, for scientific purposes, most commonly it is thought to allow the aliens to monitor their victims' movements. Part of the shaman's initiation involves a celestial journey in which he converses with the spirits of the air or the souls of the dead shamans. Abductees, too, are most commonly taken aloft, although conversation between them and the aliens is usually far more limited, if it occurs at all. If there is a link between the two experiences, then this is puzzling. It could, however, reflect the lamentable breakdown in communication that has occurred between our increasingly technological and materialistic culture in the wider universe and all of its aspects, spiritual as well as material. Indeed, this may be the very reason why humanity, particularly in the West, is being forcibly contacted by representatives of the living consciousness of the universe. Speculations on the true nature of the UFOs and their occupants can and will continue for the foreseeable future. In the final analysis, all we can do is assume and perhaps hope that the truth, when we eventually learn it, will be more fascinating than any speculation we have made yet. And then that's it. That's everything. That wraps up the book UFO Sightings by Alan Baker, the final chapter here called Conclusion. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. Interesting stuff, if it did get a little weird towards the end. I still like the idea about the time travel, like the idea of using some kind of device or some other type of way to do so. And that way it could explain how and certainly why UFOs tend to do these far distances, either across the universe so easily, or in some cases can be seen traveling back in time, including the idea that some cases those UFOs have been visiting for a long time. The idea that so-called demons, angels, and fiery gods and so on were actually UFOs or even distant relatives of ours that traveled back in time. Now, they did bring up the notion that in order to do that, you could create time paradoxes with nature in it itself. Seems to try to stop. It's almost like if it's a living force. I like how the Avengers movie, I can't remember how Iron Man said it, but he said, when you mess with time, time tends to mess back. And that's the idea here. If you do any time of time traveling, you're going to have to either not change anything. And then if you do, then it creates different multiverses, as the chapter was alluding to. So maybe all these visits from these UFOs and their occupants are related to that. They are truly traveling back in time, or as one portion of the chapter said, they're quasi-holographic images. It's like a way of cheating. It's being able to go back or go distances without interfering because they're not physically there. It's just a representation of them. And then the other notion is maybe they can do it because they know it affects different multiverses. They're not going to impact theirs. They're going to impact others. Who cares what happens at that point, right? It's just simply a way for them to do so without having repercussions. So interesting stuff. Anything involving the time travel hypothesis and the world of UFOs, fascinating. Where it did get weird is that shamanic hypothesis. I still don't really understand that, even reading it now. The idea that somehow having these spiritual conversations relates to abductees. Like, I still don't see that connection. I don't see how aliens grabbing somebody across the road in some highway and then having them gone for several hours, performing experiments and then implanting things, and then who knows what other repercussions the human has in the years or decades after has to do with having a spiritual journey involving the world of shamans. I didn't see that connection. But if someone does and wants to post it in the comments, let me know. But that's it. What do you guys think about the book, UFO Sightings? Great stuff. If you wanted to hear the whole book itself, I have the playlist set separately, so you can actually hit play from chapter 1 and then go from there. I remember how many videos are there too. It's probably hours of just videos. So you can hear everything all at once along with my continued thoughts and opinions. So, all right, everyone. Thanks again as always. I'm going to start my next book soon involving the world of alien UFOs. Let's see which one it is. All right, everyone. Take care.